Once we'd established that firm basis, foundation for our survival game, which is how you gather those resources, we then needed to think about the pressures that start get applied to the player and how they move around. And the way we actually approached designing Olympus, our first level, I actually got the idea from Chet Falzik, who's a writer for Left 4 Dead, longtime Valve employee, who actually reached out to me early on in DayZ and really mentored me and gave me some really deep insight into some of the areas that I'm particularly weak in, particularly around things like level design. Many people involved at a senior level of game development often have a good grounding in level design, and I really didn't. But hearing about how they designed those levels in Left 4 Dead really sort of inspired for us to think about how players move around. That really sort of brought forward the idea of our next milestone being this sort of industrial simulator. How do players, after they've survived, how do they start thriving? You know, and you see this in games like Factorio around the concept of throughput. How do I optimize my system? It's very common in sort of these survival or you know, sort of simulator type games. You've made something, you've built something, how do you make it better? And that really threw in concepts of how do we use vehicles. People love vehicles in survival games. As progress went on, we actually de-emphasize this later on, but you'll see this interesting process as we go through how we were experimenting using vehicles about how players move around the map. How does that factor into structures and things like that? At the same time in the project, we've outgrown our space as our team grew, and we really started developing these teams, you know, with very strong separate disciplines. Our art team being on, you know, in one space and our programming team being in the other. We called the programming team, our core programming team, Vanguard, because they were really sort of pushing and taking forward and focusing on the engine. We had a lot of experimentation around the sides with quite a large degree of autonomy as well.
Very early on, we were very much in an experimental phase of concepting and developing creatures and environments for the game. We wanted to be able to push environments and creatures in an alien direction while still being grounded in reality. And in the early stages of that, it very much meant that we were pushing it to extremes, which I think was important for us to do, just so we knew where to dial it back and where was a good place to sit. Some of the things that we designed that were quite extreme, which I really liked, were some of the apex predators. They were very much designed based around what kind of environment they came from, and as you play the game, you'll see what kind of different environments there are and what kind of environments there might be. Since that point, we've dialed it back a little bit for the beginning players and the beginning of the game, but you know, if you stick around for long enough, you might be able to see some of the more extreme, crazy things that we've developed.
When we were looking at expanding into industrial simulator, we really needed to lean into being able to create iterative and creative content. And we wanted to make sure our design team could do that without bogging themselves down in difficult technical decisions or technical problems. So my team and the core tech team, we wanted to make sure that we had fundamental systems that let them do that. We focused on the idea of traits, which are piecemeal attributes about a particular thing, whether you can set it on fire, swing it like an axe, use it like a bow, throw it like a grenade. We wanted to make sure we had these pieces and they could be reused and they could be added to any item. So if a designer ever wanted to go and make a new tool, they could kind of pick and choose pieces of functionality to create new bespoke content. That system really ended up paying dividends during that simulator as we complicated our game loop and made more options for the player to engage in. And nowadays, looking at how much we've been able to make in the product, I really think the trait system has been a fundamental piece of that work.
I actually feel like by the time, because some of this stuff will continue to be balanced and fixed in here, it's not like we're going to do it and just forget about it. So I feel like we do this. This will include some remedial work from here. So basically we'll get a little bit longer to get that right before we make it hard and dangerous. At the end of this milestone, we'd really sort of explored where we could go. And we recognized pretty early that we needed to get this foundation, which was Woodcutting Simulator. And then we wanted to see where could we take it. And that was really what Industrial Simulator was all about. We had this foundation, what could we do with it? How could we look at automation? How could we look at vehicles? How could we look at more exotic stuff? So we went from one extreme to another to just see where the game could go. And that question really got answered for us pretty solidly. And then the next approach from there was to actually revisit some of those core first mechanics with the knowledge we had of where we could go with the game.